I was reborn with John Wilson. He couldn't wait to break off the engagement with me and pursue the girl he failed to win in his previous life. I didn't pester him either. I directly denied that we ever had an engagement and then went on blind dates. There are so many good young men in the world. How old I hang myself on this one crooked tree. Later, the imperial edict bestowed a marriage on me, and I would marry in great splendor. But he climbed over my wall, his eyes red as he asked, "Ivy, would you like to leave with me?" I called some people and drove him away in a sorry state. When John came to break off the engagement, I knew he was also reborn. Damn it. He got a head start. He was the first to break off the engagement. We were childhood sweethearts. Our parents had long had an understanding that they would discuss our marriage after I came of age. In our previous life, we got married with our parents' blessings. We were in love for half a year, until the daughter of Lord Su, who had been an idiot since childhood, woke up after falling into the water and became the most talented young woman in the capital. John's heart drifted away. My mother advised me, "You're the eldest young mistress of the Wilson family. No one can outrank you. Whether it's Lily Brown or someone else, they can only be concubines if they enter the family." I knew it was common for a man to have many wives and concubines, but I just couldn't accept it. However, what could I do? Just when I couldn't figure it out, Lily came to me first during a banquet. She said to me righteously, "Mrs. Wilson, I'm not the kind of person who knows someone is married and still gets involved. I won't have any connection with Mr. Wilson. However, please keep Mr. Wilson under control and make him stop pestering me." For a moment, I didn't react. Was John infatuated with her? But this jade hairpin on her head, I had seen it in the study. There was also this expensive John's in the family ledger. Could this be called having no connection? Tolerance brings peace, but I just couldn't tolerate it. I wouldn't indulge her. I sneered and said, "This hairpin on Miss Brown's head looks very familiar to me." Lily's face darkened instantly. She angrily pulled out the hairpin and handed it to me. Ruby had served me since childhood and knew my mind best. With just a glance from me, she took the hairpin. Such an expensive thing. How could I let others have it for free? I wonder if my husband has lent other things to Miss Brown. I emphasized the word lent especially. Lily held her head high and looked at me with a disdainful look. "I'll send all the things back to Mr. Wilson tomorrow." I then said, "Well, I wonder if Miss Brown has lent anything to my husband. I'll also send them all back to Miss Brown tomorrow." Lily gritted her teeth so hard that it seemed they would break. It took her a long time to say 2 words. "No." I couldn't help but sneer. Full of sarcasm, Lily's face turned green and red. I just loved to see this newly emerged talented young woman having no way to deal with me. Later, Ruby said that my momentary pleasure had earned me a lifetime of coldness from John. But so what? Even if I had held back my anger, would John have lived a good life with me? Impossible. My tolerance would only make him even more excessive. He would still resent me for blocking his happiness with Lily. Later, Lily married the Prince of Rui and died in the backyard of the prince's mansion less than a year later. John mourned her for a lifetime and resented me for a lifetime, and I didn't make it easy for him either. If he dared to insult me once, I could insult him 10 times without using a single curse word. If he ignored me, I made sure he tasted the bitterness of being ignored too. We tormented each other for a lifetime. On his deathbed, he only said to me, "May we never meet again in the next life." I simply replied, "That suits me perfectly." When I opened my eyes again, I saw Ruby Taylor, who was about 10 years old. She hurried over to report, "Miss, John Wilson is here." I blurted out, "I want to see him." Ruby said, "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson are here too. And your parents are asking you to come to the drawing room." I paused for a moment, then got up and went to the drawing room out of respect for the elders. In his youth, John Wilson had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes, standing tall and handsome, but we despised each other at first sight. One glance was all it took to confirm. We had both been reborn. John Wilson said to the elders. Childhood promises are just playful words and shouldn't be taken seriously. Mr. Wilson's face darkened. Mrs. Wilson urged. You and Ivy Smith grew up together as childhood sweethearts. And both families know each other inside out. There's no better match for you two. Don't be foolish. Apologize to Ivy Smith right now. John Wilson naturally refused. I said gently, because we grew up together. We're like real siblings. I gain an older brother, and John Wilson gains a younger sister. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Both sets of parents sighed, and they stubbornly insisted we take a walk in the garden to build some affection, with no one else around. John Wilson and I couldn't be bothered to pretend. He looked at me warily and said, Ivy Smith, in this new life, I won't let Lily Brown down again. I scoffed coldly. What does that have to do with me? We parted on bad terms. After the Wilson family left, my parents asked me why. I have a mouth. I can speak, and I didn't mince words. Because he changed his affections, has no taste, and fell for that simple-minded young lady from the Brown family. I wasn't about to take the blame for John Wilson's mess. My parents exchanged glances, their eyes full of disbelief. My mother mused thoughtfully. The Brown family has 4 unmarried daughters. The eldest, born to the main wife, is well-educated and refined. The other 2, born to concubines, are graceful and elegant. But that one, I heard her birth mother was a prostitute, and she's been simple-minded since birth. Understanding nothing. Wasn't that true? Even if she stopped being simple-minded later and could write a few decent poems, it didn't make her any smarter. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. John Wilson will definitely propose to the Brown family. After a while, my mother said, if John Wilson proposes to the Brown family, they'll find you another good marriage. Fine. The marriage could wait. First, I needed my parents to give up on John Wilson. News of John Wilson seeking to marry the simple-minded young lady from the Brown family spread like wildfire. On every street corner, the people of the capital gossiped about it over their meals. Who would have thought that a promising young nobleman would defy his parents' objections and insist on marrying someone mentally challenged? And no one could have imagined that, a few months later, Lily Brown would fall into the water. Not only stop being simple-minded but also start composing poetry, with even the scholars of the Imperial Academy praising her verses endlessly. Thinking about it was strange and frustrating. But in this life, it had nothing to do with me. A few close friends invited me to join them for prayers and flower viewing at Yinghuai Temple, and I happily went to meet them. Yinghuai Temple was bustling with worshippers. Maple and peach trees lined both sides of the mountain path leading up. The temple's pond was filled with lotus flowers. The back hill had a grove of pear trees. And further away was a plum orchard. You could enjoy flowers all year round. The nobles and dignitaries of the capital loved coming here to offer incense. They even competed to be the first to light the incense. By the time we arrived, it was already around 10:45 a.m. First, we went to the main hall to worship the Buddha before heading out to play. Just as we reached the wishing well, we saw John Wilson and Lily Brown. At that time, Lily Brown was still a simple-minded girl. In no time, she had messed up her hair and clothes, and the maid beside her kept straightening her outfit. She would throw tantrums and roll around on the ground. What we witnessed was exactly her lying on the ground, thrashing about. The maid crouched down, urging her to get up, while John stood nearby, trying to persuade her with a deeply furrowed brow. More and more pilgrims gathered around, pointing and whispering, especially after seeing me. John's face visibly darkened. I absolutely loved seeing him in such an awkward, humiliating state. So, I decided to make it even worse. I stepped forward, raised an eyebrow slightly, and said sarcastically, John Wilson has quite the unique taste. To make the girl he adores happy, he needs to cater to her preferences. My girlfriends chuckled and chimed in. Exactly. The whole town knows about John Wilson pursuing Lily Brown, and we all thought they were a perfect match. getting along harmoniously. The crowd of onlookers grew larger. John's face turned even darker, and I felt even happier. I smiled warmly at Lily and said, "Lying on the ground won't get you any candy. Only good, obedient children can have super delicious cotton candy." Lily instantly scrambled up, bouncing over to me, exclaiming, "Super yummy candy. Eat, eat, eat." When she smiled, her eyes sparkled like a starry sky. Yet she remained so innocent at that moment. Compared to after she became clever in her past life, she was infinitely more adorable. I couldn't bring myself to dislike her. Ruby Taylor bought a cotton candy and ran over, panting. I took it and handed it directly to Lily. She happily brought it to her mouth, paused, then extended it toward me, beaming as she said, "Ivy, eat first." I paused too, feeling an indescribable mix of emotions. How could this simple girl change so drastically after she stopped being naive? How did she suddenly learn all those underhanded tricks? Lily happily munched on the cotton candy, sticking close to my side. Her maid looked troubled, and John seemed even more distressed. He hesitated for a long moment before saying to me, "Thank you." I didn't give him a friendly look and scoffed coldly. "Thank me for what? What right do you have to thank me?" His gaze was heavy as he replied, "You're still the same. Always confrontational. It's true that old habits die hard." I continued mocking him, "And you're still the same. Blind and stubborn. Utterly self-righteous." Once again, we parted on bad terms. Lily was half pushed, half persuaded by her maid to leave. She turned back and gave me a sweet smile, saying, "Ivy, yummy." I returned her smile. My girlfriends clicked their tongues disapprovingly, each adding a comment. Did a pig eat John's brain? I think so. Even his complex features can't hide his simple intelligence. That simple girl from the Brown family understands nothing. The whole broken engagement mess is all John's fault. I corrected them. John and I were never engaged. So how could there be a broken engagement? It was just childhood nonsense. The girls exchanged glances and laughed, echoing in unison, "Right. You two were never involved." Exactly. I wasn't foolish enough to saddle myself with a reputation for a broken engagement. I spread the word that the Smith family and the Wilson family had no marriage agreement. It was just good relations between the elders. My parents returned the betrothal documents and tokens. Both families went along with it, completely denying that John and I had ever been betrothed. I happily ate an extra bowl of rice. After all, in matters of marriage, it's all about parents' arrangements and matchmakers' words these days. Blind marriages without prior meetings are common. However, my parents hope that I can marry someone I like. My mother arranged blind dates for me, as long as she found anything wrong with the other party. She wouldn't let him meet me. I trust her judgment. I went to meet all the blind date partners she arranged. There was the gentle and elegant eldest son of the Grand Tutor's family, the dashing young master of the Prime Minister's family, and the valiant young general of the general's mansion. In just half a month, I went on 10 blind dates. None of them was worse than John. Come to think of it, I knew all of them, even the most unfamiliar one. I had met several times at family banquets, until the 11th one. I had never seen him in either of my 2 lifetimes. His name was James, the heir of the Duke of Yinghuai. The Duke of Yinghuai had guarded the southeast for many years, and his family moved back to the capital last month. We agreed to meet at a bookstore. When I arrived, the bookstore was empty except for the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper bowed to me and then continued with his work. This meant that the person had already arrived. I calmly looked around the bookstore and casually picked up a book, which was the story of the Western Chamber. A wealthy young lady fell in love with a poor scholar and vowed to marry no one else. This kind of story was obviously written by a poor scholar. Anyway, none of my little sisters would be so stupid. I put down the story of the Western Chamber and picked up exploitation of the works of nature. Someone walked up beside me and coughed lightly. I looked up and saw a man in gorgeous clothes with clear and handsome features. He was the heir of the Duke of Yinghuai. The one I was here to meet for a blind date today. We sat by the window on the second floor. The shopkeeper and the waiter served tea and snacks. They seemed to be very familiar with James. The first looked at them suspiciously. James said, "This bookstore is the ancestral property of the Li family. The tea and snacks are from the Mingxiang tea house next door. The Mingxiang tea house is my mother's private property." I nodded slightly, picked up the teacup and took a small sip. Then ate a piece of water chestnut cake. The tea and snacks from the Mingxiang tea house were naturally excellent. He asked, "Miss Ivy, which chapter of exploitation of the works of nature are you reading?" "The chapter oils the seeds of plants, with the help of fire and water, and with the use of wood and stone, are then squeezed out. All things in the world are so interesting." When talking about my favorite book, I unconsciously raised my eyebrows. He nodded, valuing grains over gold and jade. If all the scholars and officials could understand this truth, it would be beneficial to the country and the people. I looked up at him, trying to see if he was just saying it casually or really thought so. After all, he was also a scholar official. I said, "Scholars and officials may not be unaware. They may just not want to understand." His eyes lit up and he stared at me intently. When our eyes met, I saw admiration in his eyes. I lowered my eyes slightly to avoid his gaze. We continued to talk about books, until I suddenly realized that I had eaten half of the tea and snacks. Some snacks were prone to leaving crumbs when eaten, but they were really delicious. I wiped my mouth with a handkerchief, and there were all crumbs on it. James beside me let out a soft laugh. I sighed inwardly and, thinking what the heck, ate another piece of peach blossom cake. And then, there were more crumbs. It didn't matter if the blind date failed, but good food couldn't be wasted. After returning to the mansion, my mother asked me, "How was it this time?" I touched my round belly. I ate so much that I'm stuffed. My mother was disappointed with me and set a limit on my daily food intake. She also forbade me to eat snacks. Actually, I'm not really a glutton. It's just that the pastries I had in the study were more delicious than those I usually bought at Mingxiang Tower. One day, I was about to take a nap when Ruby came to report, "Miss, James Lee is here. He's waiting in the flower hall." I widened my eyes in surprise and headed to the flower hall in confusion. James said, "The chefs at Mingxiang Tower have made several new kinds of pastries. They'd like you, Miss Ivy, to taste them and give some suggestions." I couldn't help but curl my lips into a smile and then cautiously glanced at my mother. She was smiling so widely that her eyes were almost shut. She made an excuse to leave and told me to entertain James. Only a little maid and Ruby stayed in the flower hall to attend. James lowered his head and let out a soft laugh. "Mrs. Smith is so reasonable. No wonder she's raised such a wonderful young lady like you," he said. I focused on stuffing a piece of mille-feuille into my mouth. After finishing it, I seriously gave my suggestions. After James left, Ruby kept shaking her head and sighing. My mother called me over and was disappointed with me again. "You're not allowed to eat any pastries from now on." Then she asked, "Why weren't you like this in front of John before?" At that time, I was eager to marry him and always behaved carefully in front of him, trying hard to be a proper young lady. In my past life, I married him as I wished, only to find that he fell in love with someone else. After we had a big fight, although I was left alone in the empty room, I no longer worried about whether John would like me or not. Instead, I just did what I liked and felt much happier. In this life, I want to continue that happiness. I don't resist getting married, but I'll never give up what I like for a man again. My mother heaved a heavy sigh. "Ivy, I don't want you to be like Sophia from the White family." I murmured softly. "It's quite good to be like Sophia. Finding a few lovers to travel around with me sounds so much fun." Mentioning Sophia, I remembered that I heard from her younger sister a few days ago that she was coming back. In my previous life, Mrs. White held a lotus viewing party at the White Mansion to arrange a marriage for Sophia. It was actually a blind date party in disguise. It was at this party that Lily fell into the water and her idiocy was miraculously cured. That day, I put on new clothes and dressed up carefully. My mother was extremely satisfied. With a beaming face, she said, "My daughter is both beautiful and talented. You can find a good husband at the White family's flower viewing party this time." It was worth it to make my mother happy. When we arrived at the White mansion, there were already carriages parked in front of the gate. It was bustling with activity. Inside the mansion, the flowers were in full bloom, and the people were more charming than the flowers. In the back garden, there was a large and deep pond connected to the Imperial Canal, with fresh water flowing in. The water was deep enough to reach an adult's head. The White family's garden was unique in the capital. I walked around the pond, trying to find out where Lily was. I wanted to see with my own eyes how she became normal after falling into the water. "Sister." Lily ran towards me cheerfully and almost made both of us fall into the water. I pulled her away from the water's edge. This place seemed a bit remote, and there wasn't even a proper path. Naturally, there were no maids who could swim waiting here. "Sister." "Marshmallows." "We're not having marshmallows today. There are more delicious things." I gave a look to Lily's maid, telling her to go and get the food. The little maid stood still. Finally, Ruby half persuaded and half pushed her to go for the pastries. In someone else's mansion, I wouldn't let Ruby leave my side easily in case of any emergencies. The little maid came back quickly, followed by John. He looked at me warily and gently coaxed Lily to go and play somewhere else. However, Lily seemed to like me very much. Someone grabbed my arm and wouldn't let go, constantly shouting, "Sister." Her voice was so sweet. This little silly girl was truly endearing. Many a time, I felt a bit dazed. It was hard to believe that the little silly girl in front of me was the same person as Lily Brown from my past life. John Wilson glanced at Lily's maid. The maid pried Lily's hand off me and half pushed, half coaxed her away. John said to me, "In this life, there's no engagement between you and me. Lily has nothing to do with you and she hasn't done anything to harm you. Don't touch her." I sneered and said, "You know you hurt me before. How can you be so shameless? I'm being kind enough not to kill you right away." John pulled a long face and frowned tightly. He said, "I heard you're going on blind dates. If you don't change this bad temper, it'll be useless no matter how many times you go." I was so angry that I laughed. When God closes a door for you, does he also crush your brain with the door? You're unhappy and have a dark heart, so you assume I'm also in a bad state. It's okay to think about it in your heart, but how dare you say it out? Did you leave your crushed brain at home? Unable to out-curse me, John turned around and walked away. Ruby stood there, mouth agape, and stammered, "Miss, what you said just now." I replied, I was so angry with John that I wasn't myself. Forget everything I said to that scumbag just now. This girl couldn't imagine that I learned those sharp-tongued insults from her in my past life. Sophia White invited her little friends to gather at the waterside pavilion to drink tea and chat. Although she seemed to be a rebel and looked down upon by some, after seeing her happy life, everyone secretly envied her. Who really wanted to stay in a courtyard all their life, only to marry and raise a family and rely on a man? Who didn't want to live a free and easy life? The waterside pavilion was full of young ladies from noble families. Everyone was listening to Sophia telling interesting stories from her journey. I didn't even have a chance to sit beside her. Just when Sophia was getting really excited, Lily ran over. She directly threw herself into my arms, crying so hard that her tears soaked my clothes. She sobbed, "Sister, don't play with water. Shaoli is bad. Brother is bad." Hearing this, I looked at the maid outside the pavilion. She looked nervous and uncomfortable. When she met my gaze, she lowered her head guiltily. I pointed at the maid and said, "Come here." The maid hesitated for a few seconds, then stepped forward and bowed. "Your servant, Shaoli, greets the young ladies." I asked in a serious tone, "What happened to your young lady just now?" the maid replied. To answer Miss Ivy. My young lady insisted on picking the lotus leaves, and I tried to stop her. I sneered again and again. This maid named Shaoli was clearly bullying the silly Lily. My little friend beside me looked at me strangely and whispered, Ivy. This is Miss Brown from the Brown family. I nodded as a response. I not only knew that she was the girl who made John fall in love with someone else, I also knew that this little silly girl was about to become smart. But somehow, I felt more and more that they weren't the same person. I suspected that someone had disguised as Lily and taken her place. When there's a question, I should find the answer. So I kept an eye on her and stood up for her. If my guess was right, maybe I could even save her life. I really wanted to see what John would do then. Would he marry this silly girl? I gently patted my little friend's hand to show that I knew what I was doing. Lily held on to me tightly, and the maid was extremely anxious. Remembering how the maid used to obey John blindly, I had a rough idea in my mind. It should be that John was getting impatient. After his rebirth, he had been waiting for the day when Lily would fall into the water. Before she could fall into the water as she had in my past life, he was already scheming to create the conditions for her to drown. That man, who once shared my pillow in my previous life. I should be thanking him for sparing my life. Calling him a dog is an insult to actual dogs. I had Lily Brown stay by my side. Sophia White glanced back and forth between us and instructed the maid to serve tea and pastries. Just like that, my friends and I continued chatting in the waterside pavilion, listening to Sophia share amusing anecdotes. After some time, a sudden splash followed by shouts broke the calm. Someone's fallen in. It was a young maid from the White household who was pulled out. After a scolding from the housekeeper, she hurried off to change clothes. The whole incident barely registered as a minor interruption. Unexpectedly, during the poetry competition among the noble young men, that same maid composed an excellent poem. Her name was Emma Clark. Servants in the White household whispered that Emma couldn't even read before. Yet now she composed poetry, and it was Lily Brown's work from my past life. Glancing at the silly girl grinning foolishly beside me, I was stunned. So, it wasn't a disguise, it was soul possession. After the White family's lotus viewing party, that maid produced several more poems. I had always been poor at poetry and literature, and in my past life, I despised Lily Brown so intensely that I never memorized her verses. But seeing those poems now, I recognized them as hers. Currently, Lily was still mentally impaired. Yet that maid named Emma composed poems identical to Lily's past work, her speech and mannerisms eerily mirroring Lily from before. So, she was a soul possessor. In this life, she had become a maid in the White household. How fascinating. Without her status as the daughter of Assistant Minister Brown, would John Wilson still want to marry her in this life? He did, defying the vast difference in their social standing. He insisted on marrying the White family maid. I heard Mr. Wilson personally administered the family discipline, beating John so severely he couldn't leave his bed. Mrs. Wilson cried until her eyes were red, fainting multiple times. I also heard Mrs. White intended to sell off that maid named Emma, but Sophia intervened and gifted her to John Wilson instead. When I next met Sophia, she raised an eyebrow at me and asked, Ivy, did I act according to your wishes? Or did I bungle it and cause you trouble? I lifted my chin, my eyes meeting hers. Exactly what I wanted. John Wilson abandoned me, his childhood friend, for a girl who'd been mentally impaired since birth, before that engagement was even settled. He then pursued a maid from another household. Who could possibly respect a man like that? No respectable family in the capital would offer their daughter to him now. Consequently, the Wilson family hastily arranged a marriage for him to the daughter of one of Mr. Wilson's subordinates, a girl from a humble but decent background. A pity for such a good young woman. The Wilsons sent a respectable matron to deliver the wedding invitation to my home. Out of deference to their long-standing friendship, me father and Mr. Wilson were colleagues, me mother accepted it. On the day of the Wilson wedding, I dressed carefully. Before leaving, My mother studied me intently, even asking me to turn around. She asked anxiously, "Ivy, are you truly over him?" I nodded seriously. That doesn't mean I won't enjoy watching him become a laughingstock. Mother watched me for a moment longer. I've seen many women rejected by their fiancés, or neglected by their husbands after marriage. Some couldn't bear it, even taking their own lives. Others took years to move on, avoiding the person who hurt them forever. But you say you're over him, yet you don't hide your hatred for John Wilson. Yet when you speak of him, there's not a trace of love in your eyes. I laughed softly, looping my arm through hers and resting my head on her shoulder. "Well," I said, unhurried, "it's complicated, Mom. Letting him go and seeking revenge are two different things. I no longer have feelings for him. But that doesn't stop me from hating him. Why should I do nothing and just forget after he wronged me first? That would be too easy for him. Once I vent this anger, they'll treat him like a stranger." When we arrived at the Wilson family mansion, the Brown family's carriage had just stopped. Lily Brown saw me and ran over with a beaming smile, jumping up to hug me like an octopus. "Sister." I almost got knocked over. I gently patted her back and told her to get off me. "I've made a clear distinction now. This silly girl in front of me is truly a little fool. Not the one from my past life who accepted John Wilson's expensive gifts while insisting they were purely innocent." My mother and the people from the Brown family were stunned. Mrs. Brown apologized and told the maid to take Lily away. But Lily, with a childlike intelligence, clung to me tightly, refusing to go with the maid. Seeing this, my mother said to Mrs. Brown, "Miss Lily and my daughter hit it off well. Let her stay with my daughter today." Since my father held a high official position and my mother spoke up, Mrs. Brown didn't force Lily anymore. She even seized the chance to call my mother an old sister and joined us in entering the Wilson family mansion to offer congratulations. The ladies gathered to chat, and I took Lily to find my girlfriends. While I hesitated, I lost focus for a moment. When I turned around, Lily, who had been following me, was gone. Ruby Taylor whispered in my ear, "They went to the lotus pond in the back garden." Another lotus pond. The ponds in most mansions are shallow, at most knee-deep. Only the White family's pond was dug large and deep, connected to the Imperial River. The White family's little maid, Emma Clark, had been given to the Wilson family and followed John Wilson without any status. From my knowledge of her in my past life, she wouldn't be content. In that past life, she didn't just manipulate John. She climbed up using men's power and eventually became the Princess of Rue. Ambitious and cunning, but there's always someone better. And she fell in the prince's backyard. In this life, she's just a small maid. Her capabilities are limited. On a day like today, I expected her to make a move, but I never imagined she'd try to possess Lily again. When Lily was pushed into the lotus pond, Ruby grabbed her in time. She cried out in terror, and as soon as my girlfriends and I appeared, she ran over and clung to me, refusing to let go. When John Wilson arrived, Emma was already restrained. Mrs. Wilson was so furious her face turned purple, and ignoring us outsiders, she slapped Emma directly. John, dressed in bright red wedding attire, hurriedly shielded Emma. Mrs. Brown asked me, "Miss Ivy Smith, what happened to my Lily?" Seemingly concerned, but actually not only putting Lily in the spotlight but also trying to drag me down. I narrowed my eyes slightly. "Mrs. Brown, Lily is naive. You should ask the maid who was with her." I remembered that maid was called Shaoli. Last time at the White family mansion, she helped John try to make Lily fall into the water. Would Mrs. Brown not know? By the way, where is Lily's maid? Why haven't we seen her? Could she have been deliberately sent away? I raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Brown, who do you think sent the maid away?" Previously, that maid helped John try to harm Lily by drowning. And this time my gut told me Mrs. Brown had sent her away. Mrs. Brown's face stiffened for a moment before she turned to Mrs. Wilson and said, Mrs. Wilson. I must demand justice from your Wilson family for this. Mrs. Wilson wanted to hand Emma over to the Brown family for punishment. John naturally refused. After a standoff, Mrs. Wilson approached Mrs. Brown and whispered a few words. Mrs. Brown smiled with satisfaction, though I couldn't hear what they said. It was obvious Mrs. Wilson promised Mrs. Brown a big benefit. Lily stared at me with clear eyes. This fool was being used by Mrs. Brown. I sighed softly with a tender heart and reached out to stroke her head. She gave me a toothy smile. My close friend sighed and said, "Who would have thought that a cotton candy from the Yinghuai temple would make this girl from the Brown family wholeheartedly trust and rely on you?" Yeah. She was deceived by just a cotton candy. I didn't even dare to say that I was also going to take advantage of her. Emma was locked in the woodshed and wasn't sold off. Because John Wilson bowed his head and promised Mrs. Wilson that he would go to welcome the bride. When he left, he glanced in our direction. His look was complicated. It scared Lily Brown so much that she hugged me tightly. I gently patted her and then gave John a warning look. In the evening, the bride entered the house. Just as they were about to start the wedding ceremony, Lily's maid, Xiaoli, shouted loudly, "Someone has fallen into the water." The word falling into the water had a very special meaning to John, and the one shouting was Lily's maid. I didn't believe he wouldn't be shaken. Sure enough, he left the bride behind and rushed to the pond in a hurry. Mrs. Wilson shouted anxiously, "John." John stopped at the threshold, hesitated for a moment, and then ran out of the wedding hall without looking back. In the wedding hall, Mr. Wilson's face turned ashen, and Mrs. Wilson's eyes turned red. They awkwardly entertained the guests. The wedding matchmaker flattered and said, "The groom is kind-hearted and went to save someone. It's all good timing today. It won't be a problem." I silently left the bustling area. In the corner, Sophia White was coaxing Lily like a child. As soon as I came over, Lily became well-behaved. Sophia raised her eyebrows and asked me, "Are you done with your business?" I spread my hands and said, "I'm just here with my parents to congratulate and attend the wedding banquet. What business could I possibly have?" All I did was distract the person guarding the woodshed, quietly let Emma out of the woodshed, made her see Lily going to the lotus pond alone, and led Emma there. Then I asked Sophia for a small favor. I asked her to also lead someone to the lotus pond, creating an opportunity that Emma couldn't miss. Oh, and I also coerced and bribed Lily's maid. Everything was ready. There was no need for any additional help, and John just walked into the trap by himself. Didn't they want someone to fall into the water and see someone else's body? Well, I sent someone into the water. Let's see if they can afford to provoke this. The person who fell into the water was Princess Yinghuai. This princess was the daughter of the eldest princess. Her parents died, and the Empress Dowager and the Emperor pitied her and doted on her extremely, almost holding her in the palm of their hands. They even bestowed a princess mansion on her. She had almost all the honors that only a princess could enjoy. She had been married twice, and both of her husbands died strangely. Sophia chuckled. "I'm more than happy to help by using Princess Yinghuai and making her choke on some water. I've never gotten along with her since childhood. I like men but don't like getting married. She likes getting married but hates men. It should have been a matter of different preferences. But she always talks to me in a sarcastic way." I didn't comment. I just wished for a pair of clean ears. Sophia said, "Once John gets involved with Princess Yinghuai, he'll be in big trouble even if he doesn't die." I just smiled and said nothing. After returning to the mansion, my mother kept me and sent the servants away. She asked seriously, "Ivy, what did you do?" Knowing that she was worried about me, I told her selectively. I said, "I saw that little maid push Princess Yinghuai into the water. The water in the lotus pond was shallow, and she held her under the water." I didn't say that I used Lily to lead Emma to the lotus pond and deliberately let her know that the person by the water was Princess Yinghuai, who was deeply loved by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. Emma had the idea of seizing Princess Yinghuai's body. How could I let her succeed? based on the fact that both she and John wanted Lily to fall into the water. As long as the person in the water didn't die. She couldn't seize the body. I had people arranged nearby, so Princess Yinghuai wouldn't die, and she couldn't possess anyone. My mother frowned more deeply and asked, "What's with Lily Brown's little maid?" I deliberately acted like a child who had done something wrong, avoiding eye contact, and said guiltily, "I threatened her to call for help." Mother was both angry and anxious. "Did you handle it cleanly?" I nodded repeatedly. "That little maid doesn't dare to speak out. And besides, I didn't show myself personally. She doesn't know who it was, even if she spoke. So what? What could this prove? Without evidence, I could just claim she was instructed to frame me." Princess Yinghuai alleged that John Wilson had been intimate with her and demanded he take responsibility. The bride was spirited. She tossed off her red veil, got back into the sedan chair, and returned home. The next day, she turned around and married someone else. I heard they were childhood sweethearts, well matched in social status. Before, her father had opposed their marriage, wanting to marry his daughter to the son of his superior, which was John Wilson. After this mess, her father nodded and let her marry the person she wanted. As for John, an imperial decree arranged the marriage, and he became Princess Yinghuai's third consort. I heard that on the day John was forced into the princess residence, Yinghuai had Emma Clark brought over. Knowing they weren't doing well made me happy. Following my mother's arrangement, I continued dating. This time, we met at Tea Fragrance Pavilion. The waiter lifted the curtain, and as I walked over, I saw James Lee. He smiled and said, "Miss Ivy Smith. Ching Shitsi is busy with official duties." So I came. I couldn't hold back. I chuckled and burst out laughing. He actually could be shy, clearly embarrassed. Yet he kept gazing at me as if unable to look away. That stare made it hard not to daydream. I also recalled hearing about him in my past life. After his family returned to the capital, he went to the southeast and was struck by a poisoned arrow during bandit suppression. By my calculation, it was around this time. I asked, "James, are you still planning to go to the southeast?" His eyes suddenly lit up, and he said, "No plans for now." Waiting for the court's orders, the waiter served tea and snacks. Another new treat I hadn't tasted before. My taste buds were conquered again. James said that if I nodded in agreement, he would request an imperial decree for marriage. I didn't accept directly but went back to report to my parents. My parents said it was up to me whether I wanted to marry, since they always put me first. I couldn't just think of myself and disregard them. I envy Sophia White, but I can't be as free-spirited as her. This world is too harsh on women. If I never married, it wouldn't just affect me, but also my parents, and other women of the Smith family and its branches. What could I do? I could only keep my eyes wide open and choose the most suitable marriage partner. James was undoubtedly suitable. If he treated me well, I would fully enjoy that kindness and return it in kind. If he changed his heart, I would take mine back, with an imperial decree for marriage. My status after wedding him would be unshakable. I could protect my own heart. After careful thought and weighing the pros and cons, I nodded. James really obtained the imperial decree for marriage. Not only that, the Empress Dowager bestowed gifts, with her leading the way. Other nobles in the palace followed with gifts, and various families came to add to my dowry. My mother specially cleared out 2 courtyards to store my bridal trousseau. She smiled and said, "The Empress Dowagers and Empress gifts will each make 1 display case." Leading the procession when moving the dowry, the gifts from other palace nobles filled 4 chests, then the dowry presents from other households, totaling 6 chests. All walking at the front, the rest are all prepared by your parents. I couldn't help but feel my eyes moisten slightly. With my parents as my backing, I'm not afraid of anything. In my past life, I was able to be so tough with John Wilson precisely because of my parents and the Smith family. I'm truly not afraid. On the eve of my wedding, I unexpectedly saw John. He actually had the nerve to climb onto the wall of my yard. I gave Ruby a signal, asking her to quietly go and call a few discreet people over. John looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "Ivy, I've known from the beginning that you were reborn. We were supposed to be husband and wife. I was wrong. In my past life, I was sorry to you. Please give me a chance to make it up to you." "Okay." I coldly looked at his haggard appearance and the whip marks on the back of his hand. "You're not really realizing your mistake. You're just grasping at straws and seeing me as your last hope," I said. He seemed not to catch the sarcasm in my words and said, "Ivy, let's leave together." "Okay." I let out a cold laugh. The imperial edict for the marriage was requested by James. "But do you know why the Queen Mother added a dowry?" He stared at me blankly, with a complex look on his face. I told him, "The father and son of the Duke of Stability are in the Emperor's favor. That's why James was able to get the imperial edict for the marriage. But the Queen Mother added a dowry because of his Lady Yinghuai." I deliberately emphasized the last 6 words. Then, as I expected, his face turned deathly pale. Finally, Ruby brought the people over. I didn't want to waste more words on him. We beat him until he fled in a hurry. His current situation is the just reward he deserves, and I have no interest in being his last hope. If one repays hatred with kindness, then what should one use to repay kindness? On the day I returned to my parents' house, I heard that the 3rd husband of Lady Yinghuai suddenly died. My mother mentioned that we should pay condolences to the Lady Yinghuai's mansion. I didn't comment. Not long after, Sophia was going on a trip outside the capital. When she was leaving, I went to see her off. Sophia told me that Emma had been tortured half to death by Lady Yinghuai. One day, she suddenly lost her memory and only remembered things before she fell into the water at the White family mansion. She said, "A stewardess in our mansion regards her as her own daughter." She pleaded with me, and I softened my heart and agreed. Now that girl is on her way back to her hometown. It's possible that she's faking amnesia, or it could be that the person who took over her body has left and the original Emma has come back to life. However, it has nothing to do with me now. I said to Sophia, "My husband will be transferred to the south of the Yangtze River to serve as the Provincial Judicial Commissioner of Zhejiang. If you pass by there, remember to come and visit me. I still want to hear more interesting stories from you." "Okay," she said with a smile and waved goodbye to me. I envy her, but I haven't become like her. We've taken different paths. However, each path has its own scenery. There's no right or wrong, good or bad. The end.